Hello and welcome to the studios of Catholic Answers Live. Once again, we've got a great lineup of caller questions for you, and answering those questions, we've got our own apologists, Trent Horn and Tim Staples, our chaplain, Father Hugh Barber, the director of publishing here at Catholic Answers, Todd Agliolaro, and our president, Christopher Check. Questions they'll address include, how was the creation of Islam influenced by Christianity? How has technology changed society's reading habits? Did the Church's devotion to Mary start with the Rosary? Will we receive a new name if we reach heaven, and much more? Thanks for watching. Enjoy the show.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe we are given a unique name when we reach heaven. But yes. I don't remember where I read that.
That is Revelation chapter 2, verse 17, my friend. That is a beautiful text where, of course, in the context of the book of Revelation, written by St. John, it's very important because there we receive this special name that their scripture says only the one who receives it and Jesus knows what it is. It's on a little psephos in Greek, a little white stone. They used to use those for casting lots or for voting. They're little white stones. Psephos is the Greek word. And why that's very important, well, for many reasons, but John is writing against the first century precursor, sort of fathers of Gnosticism, like Simon the magician, and of course Cerinthus, who we read a lot about from St. Irenaeus and Eusebius of Caesarea. And they denied the individuality of each human person, so that only when you're alive on this earth are you an individual. When you die, your body goes to the dust, and that was the individuating principle, was the matter. You go back, to, the agent intellect or the nous or whatever the particular philosophy is, but there's no longer individuality. And so that's a very important text there in Revelation 2 that talks about how each one of us will be an individual and for all eternity. That stuff, by the way, creeps into some Christian theologies as well. Theologies that downplay the body, for example. Mm-hmm. That, I heard one evangelist on television. I can picture him right now talking about how our bodies are just dirt suits. It's just a dirt suit, and when you die, you get rid of that, and then you're free because your soul will be set free and all. No, we are by nature a body-soul composite, and so forth. So it's very important that we understand that we are individuals. We're not part of some collective, and our individuality disappears when we die. And then, we can kind of then by allusion say, John, that's kind of the foundation for why John teaches that, but that's so important for us to understand because it emphasizes the fact that we talk about a personal relationship with Jesus. We will have that for all eternity, in a sense, one-on-one as individuals, but of course in the context of being members of the body of Christ. So it's not a individualism, because we're also members of a body and the kingdom of God. So we are a body, but that doesn't take away. I love the way St. Paul says it. We are members individually as well as parts of a body. 1 Corinthians 12 through 27.
You didn't know that what was behind all that, I gather, Paul.
No, that was incredible explanation, actually.
All right, brother.
What chapter and verse did you say that was in Revelation?
Yes, that's Revelation chapter 2, and I believe it's verse 17. I'm going to flip over there to make sure I'm right. Sometimes I get a few verses off. You know what's happened? I tell Cy all the time, I've been Catholic too long, and so sometimes, I forget Bible verses,
Being Catholic will do that.
In order to be a good Catholic, I figure I should forget a few Bible verses here and there. But anyway, I believe it is Revelation. Let me get it right here. Here we go. Yep, I got it right. Revelation 2:17. I will give him a white stone with a new name written on the stone, which no one knows except him who receives it. Beautiful text.
Father, I want to ask you about Muhammad, but I want to ask you this way as a Thomist. What did the medieval church and maybe even the earlier then medieval people make of Muhammad? What did Christians make of Islam?
It's an interesting question because, you have like Hilary Belloc who writes, says, well, Islam was really kind of viewed by them as an extreme form of heresy.
Okay.
And there's a reason for that. I mean, obviously it's more than a heresy because it doesn't accept, it's not part of the church and never was.
Yeah.
But the fact that Muhammad took from Christianity and Judaism elements that he found interesting and compelling and concocted a kind of faith.
Yeah.
It makes him very similar if you consider with Joseph Smith.
Yeah, Joseph of the Mormons.
Like with the Mormons, that is, he read about Masonry, he'd read the Bible, he'd read this, he'd read that, and so he came up with a religion that kind of combined all these elements.
Right.
Well, Muhammad was a trader who went between...
A man who did trade, not a traitor.
Trader.
Yeah.
All right. Who went between the Arabian Peninsula and Damascus.
Yeah.
And, of course, people stayed in monasteries
along
the way, and he was acquainted with Christian worship in the monasteries and also with Jewish worship and with the beliefs of Christians and Jews. And at that time, for example, Mecca was a Christian town. People don't realize it, but the Kaaba that they go around in their pilgrimage, it until very recently, the Salafists got rid of it. It had paintings of Our Lady and the Christ Child in it. It was an actual Christian chapel. And the whole Islamic period preserved those images until the Salafists just in the 20th century, and they got rid of everything.
Yeah.
So, but they're images of these things. So he produced a religion that was an amalgam of elements of Christianity and Judaism.
Okay.
And you see it in the manner of worship and in particular points. That is, he focused on the idea of an inspired scripture.
Yeah.
And then an eschatological idea that there'll be an end of the world and a judgment.
Yes.
Okay, and then certain moral rules and the idea what anybody who experienced Christianity at the time of Muhammad would think, well, Christians are people that pray at different times of the day.
Yeah, all right.
Because the practice
liturgy of the hours
of rising after midnight or around midnight and then at different hours of the day and praying in the church or at home was so widespread that it was characteristic of Christians. I mean,
so it was natural for him to bring that into Islam.
And you can see this today. I don't know about, but I know that with the Copts, for example, the Coptic Christians today, they still Saturday night, before Sunday worship, they have a night vigil that people attend or pray on their own. And in the Russian tradition too, you have the all-night vigil before Sunday and the praying of the divine office. And for us in the Latin church, it was maintained only in the monasteries.
Yeah.
But that's where he witnessed it in the first place. So, and of course, and the gesture of prayer at that time, they didn't have pews. Christians didn't have pews. And if I could get rid of pews completely, I would.
I didn't know you're anti-pew.
I'm very anti-pew.
Anti-pewist.
The people just knelt down and they touched their heads to the floor and got up again and touched it and got up again. It was the prostrations that you identify now with Muslims.
Christians would have done those.
But they got it from us. But we were under the influence of the rationalists of the 17th century, and so we decided that worship was an instruction that we're supposed to undergo and not an activity. So he imitated all these things he found with the Christians and Jews of his time and came up with a simplified version without sacraments, without hierarchy, without supernatural mysteries revealed, without mysticism.
Yeah.
And that is an easily portable religion. And also, he was allowed to, in religion, you're allowed to force it on people. You don't have to convert them internally. You can just force them to submit.
Right.
And that's what Islam means, submission.
Yes.
And St. Thomas points that out, that the difference between Christianity and Islam is that Christianity was propagated by poor men with no means who were persecuted and did not use violence and were able to convert the whole world. Whereas Islam was established by men who had material means and violence and were able to get people to submit by the force of the sword. Mm-hmm. And there's the difference. And St. Thomas points that out in the Summa Contra Gentiles.
I got it.
So, and it's that's the difference.
Very informative. Thank you. Thanks, Father. Todd, if I may start with you. Your whole life is books. What is technology doing to books? What's the history? What's the future of it? Are books going away?
That's a good question. And the spectrum that you laid out a few seconds ago applies to publishing, to anything else. So to some extent, the increase in the choices for entertainment that people have now with the screens, as you put it, and virtual reality and all that stuff acts as a disincentive to read. On the other hand, ebooks, new ways, new media through which to get books to the people are having the opposite effect. So it's a mixed bag, I think.
Do you think, just the kind of the experience of a book, it wasn't that long ago that you wanted to read a book, you had to get a book. You had to go to the library, or you got to go to a bookstore. You get a book. You get a physical thing in your hand. I can remember 8th grade carrying home The Lord of the Rings from the library and going into a different world. And it's a very tactile experience. Does the loss of that, like maybe, for example, I might now get it on Audible and have somebody else read it to me.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that is sentimentality and how much of that is part of the real reading experience. So you've got not just tactility, you've got many of the senses involved.
The smell.
The smell being one of them. The crinkle of a page.
Yeah.
The difference in the way a paper page catches the light compared to a screen, even an e-ink screen. And there are some who say, and I don't think they're being merely sentimental, it seems to be an authentic human experience. There's something in the book, in the physical book, that isn't quite replicated in the electronic format.
How about this, Todd? The capacity, I don't know if this is the correct verb, to interact with a printed book in a way that you cannot with text on a screen. I'm thinking specifically, and I will probably alarm some readers, but I write in books.
Oh, you put your notes in books.
When I'm reading them.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a first edition or something, maybe I don't, I guess. But there's a relationship between me and that printed word on that paper. How do you? I suppose there's a way to do that.
Yeah, and that relationship becomes so that the book becomes literally imprinted with your personality.
Right.
To the next owner, to the person you lend it to someone in a used bookstore 50 years from now.
Well, I think of my father, who has, I don't know, maybe 3,000 or 4,000 titles in his library. And one of the joys of going through these, and he spends a good bit of his retirement going through the used bookstores in Fort Worth and Dallas. And one of the joys of looking through his collection, besides seeing the finds that he comes up with from time to time, are the dedications, on in the frontispiece to so and so on their confirmation or whatever the reason is, and there's a whole history.
They become human artifacts,
right?
And you can't put liner notes, you can't underline on a screen, you can't have an author sign an ebook,
right?
On the other hand, though, just to get back real quick, side to your question about interaction and what Chris's point was about interaction. To defend the e-format a little bit, since it seems to be getting a bad rap here, is there's kinds of interaction you can do with an ebook too. You can cross-reference words and ideas with the internet. You can look up definitions. I've done that 1,000 times as I've read books. So again, as with anything, there is a trade-off.
I'm gonna disagree with you. Well, no, I'm not saying that you can't do that because you can, but it seems to me to become sort of mechanical. So. I don't read on screens, but I know you can click on a word and then get the definition or something with that interactability.
Yeah.
But I was in high school a long time ago, and we had dictionaries next to us when we read books.
Oh, yeah, right.
And if there was a word we didn't know, we looked it up.
What is this dictionary of which you speak?
Yeah.
That was an old thing. That was the thing people used to have.
I still have one in my house.
Yeah, they used to have phone books, too.
I find that mechanism that you described, Todd, to be distracting.
Well,
so in fact, here's a good example. I should be honest. I do read online, crisismagazine.com, for example. I get that in my feed, and so whenever there's an article on there, Tony Esolen has something, and then there'll be live links in there, and I resist clicking the live link because I want to read the piece.
Yeah.
But the temptation is there, and I do that from time to time.
Well, I get that. So an article that's replete with links does create a temptation, kind of ADD, hopping around from one thing to another, and that's probably a bad habit of mind. But I think this maybe gets closer to that sentimentality to which I was referring before. I don't share your aversion to the screen as nearly as much. But on the same token,
you're younger.
Well, just a little bit, but I don't have a dog in this fight either. So I see both sides, I think.
Well, let me ask you this.
You do have a dog in it. You run a press. I mean, Catholic Answers is committed to the printed word.
The boss wants you to be committed to books.
No, well, I mean, part of the reason I love Todd is because he shares my love for print.
I do, but I say I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't mean one format over the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly, I have a dog in the publishing fight.
I will say this, Si, it's necessary, and we have to be open to this, for an apostolate like Catholic Answers to move in as many media as we can.
But let me throw something out to you about another role of books that I don't. Again, this may just be entirely sentimental, but our kids, we have bookshelves in our house, and the bookshelves have books on them, and their friends come over to visit, and they go, "Why do you have all those books?"
We have this experience.
It's similar, but not as important, clearly, but we have a crucifix on the wall when you walk in the house. So somebody might say, "Why do you have that crucifix?" Although they may not know the word for it, but why do you have that on the wall? And there's a way in which I think growing up with magazines on the table and books on the shelf, and grab that encyclopedia. And we actually never had an encyclopedia, so I don't want to. We use the web for our encyclopedia, but grab that reference book or whatever. And these are things that somehow communicate something about who we are, and I wonder what will replace it. The shelves of books at home.
It does say something about the Kellett family, because people come in and then they see the sorts of books that you have on the shelf. Or Todd, I've been to Todd's house.
They see the amount of dust on the books. Meaning
and Todd has hundreds and hundreds of books all over the house as well. But it says, okay, this is a family that reads, right? But also reads what? What? When I go to Todd's house, I see Chesterton and Belloc on the shelf, for example.
Right.
You come to my house, you'll see Sigurd Undset or Walker Percy or every obscure history of the 16th century.
I've got Daniel Dennett and Christopher Hitchens, which actually upsets me a little bit because I would get these Daniel Dennett books, read them, and then I'm like, well, do you keep this on the shelf? Because you don't want the kids to grab this off the shelf. They're not ready for it. Do you just see what I'm saying? Daniel Dennett, of course, the famous atheist philosopher. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say.
What do you do with books like that?
Well, I don't have Daniel Dennett in my house.
Well, that's why I keep my Harold Robbins all under the bed, so it's safe that way. No, there is something totemistic. There's something iconic or something sacramental even about the physical
sacramental
presence
is
of
a good
books in
word.
your house. Yeah. And something you didn't mention, but where I thought you might have been going, Si, was, and I have children ranging from 6 to 23, so I have a real span there. And I know from my own upbringing too, to be able to wander through a house on a rainy day and pick something up, have something fall out of a shelf, curl up in a corner where there's a kind of discovery that's possible with a physical book that really isn't with an ebook because you're kind of intentionally going to it,
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
I can remember that in my grandmother's house, finding books in the summertime when you get to that bored part of the summertime, and all of a sudden I'm reading a history of Cape Cod. Who needs to read it? You don't need that, but it's good for it. There's something wonderful.
This is the exact reason that Jackie and I filled up the house with books, and our kids discovered them. So if it was G.A. Henty or Louis de Waal or John Buchan or whatever, they found them. The environment was there, right?
Yeah.
And then they went to them.
From my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the Catholic Church didn't start praying the Rosary till the 1200s after St. Dominic had a vision. So my question is, if the Church didn't pray the Rosary or didn't have this devotion to Mary for the first 1,000 years of Church history, then why is it a big deal in Catholicism today?
That's a very good question, Anonymous. First, I would say that the Church has always had a devotion to Mary, and we can see this in historical documents, in documents related to church liturgy. the church has not always had the rosary. That is a particular kind of devotion that developed in the Middle Ages. Part of its roots come from just repetition among those who were illiterate, for example, to be able to pray and meditate on the mysteries of Christ. So, for example, the monks could pray the Psalter, for example, and so lay people could pray 150 Our Fathers to understand and to meditate upon the Psalms, meditate on the life of Christ. Later, what was attached to this is praying and repeating the Hail Mary that's found in Luke chapter 1. But we do see Marian devotion long before the 12th, 13th, 14th century in the history of the church. In fact, one of the earliest recorded liturgies includes the following Marian prayer. This is from a fragment in the John Rylands Library in Manchester, England. It's fragment 470. It's from a Coptic Christian liturgy, Coptic Christmas liturgy. And this is what the prayer says. This is dated to about the 3rd century. It says, "Beneath thy compassion we take refuge, O Mother of God," or Theotokos. "Do not despise our petitions in time of trouble, but rescue us from dangers. Only pure one, only blessed one." So there we see a part of liturgy where Christians seek the intercession of Mary and ask for her prayers and for her protection as early as the 3rd century. So the idea is they're quite early. Later on, different, of course, it's similar in all piety and all kinds of prayer, different pious practices develop over time. And so how we pray is going to develop and change over time. But the essential elements of our faith that guide us in our prayer, those sacred traditions given to us in the deposit of faith, those dogmatic truths do not change. So the rosary developed later, but Marian devotion and seeking her intercession was there from the earliest parts of church history. So I guess that'd be the answer to the first part. Is that helpful for you on that regard?
Yeah, that is very helpful. And I guess my second question is, because my biggest hurdle was basically, as a Protestant, just used to praying directly to God, not to Mary or the saints.
Sure.
Is it a requirement, like a mandate, that if you become Catholic, you have to pray to Mary for intercession? Or can you be Catholic and just pray directly to God?
Sure. Well, you can be Catholic as long as you accept the dogmas that the Church teaches. So those beliefs that require the assent of faith. As long as you believe and hold those, then certainly you can be Catholic. Along with that would come with believing with the religious submission of mind and will, with believing and accepting what the Church teaches to be true. So as long as you accept that it is permissible to seek the intercession of the saints, you're not necessarily obligated in your personal prayer life to engage in that prayer if that's something that you're still struggling with. The Church offers a wide variety of means to pray and bring ourselves before God. The only aspects of our spiritual life that have a mandate to them, for example, would be fulfilling our obligation to attend Mass on Sundays and holy days. But different areas to grow in our piety, whether it's through prayers of intercession, Lectio Divina, that would be up to you as an individual to grow in your comfort in those different areas to apply them to your life. So when it comes to that, but I would say that you should just dive deeper into that and to not let that be a stumbling block for you as you continue your research into the Church. Do you have any other thoughts on that or anything else to bounce off me? Or?
No, that was very helpful. No, thank you so much. I appreciate your answers.
Yeah, Anonymous, I have a question for you. My colleague, Tim Staples, he wrote a wonderful book on Mary, probably one of the best I think is out there, called Behold Your Mother. It's probably one of the best treatments on Mary and her place within the Catholic Church and the biblical and historical foundations for the Marian dogmas. Have you had a chance to read or see that book?
I have not.
Okay, well, I tell you what, I'd like you to stay on the line. I know you're anonymous here on air, but if you could leave your contact information, I would like to send you a copy of that book because I think it may help you. If this is an area that you have difficulties with, it might be a great resource for you to look into as you continue discerning the Catholic Church. So would that be helpful?
That would be very helpful. Thank you so much.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you, Anonymous.
If the process of canonization has always been the same, which I don't know if it has or not, is there a possibility that sometime in the distant past, there were people that have been canonized as saints, say more so for like a political reason or something like that? So that's where the question kind of comes from. Is there a possibility that there are people that have been canonized that are not actually saints?
That is a great question, and the answer is no, because canonization is an infallible act of the Pope. Now, canonization, the formal canonization, didn't begin in the church till roughly the 9th century, right around 800. Before that time, saints were declared to be saints by popular acclamation. That is, the church it grew up organically. This was the case, for example, with the apostles. The 12 apostles have never been canonized. It kind of seems superfluous, right? But they're saints by popular acclamation, and of course by revelation as well, because we see in Revelation 21:14 their names are engraved on the gates of heaven and that sort of thing. But still, many of the early fathers, even martyrs, St. Ignatius, St. Clement of Alexandria, and on down the list, they were never canonized. They were saints by popular acclamation, and the church doesn't, see the need to go back and canonize all these folks because they're on the Roman calendar now. They're acknowledged to be saints. However, the formal process of canonization, a major distinction between being beatified and canonized is that canonization is an infallible act. Beatification technically is not. You can be put on the Roman calendar, in the liturgy and such, but canonization is infallible. So anybody who has been canonized, we know by the promise of Jesus Christ that the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church, that he or she is in heaven.
Thanks for watching Catholic Answers Live TV. Join us each weekday from 3 to 5 Pacific and 6 to 8 Eastern for our live radio broadcast on EWTN Radio. Or join us on the EWTN app. Find more videos and live streams on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/CatholicCom, or find us on Facebook simply by searching Catholic Answers. Jesus Christ is the light of the nations, and we'll see you next week on Catholic Answers Live TV.